And I'd like to just say this, that with regard to the sacrifices our priests make, the most important thing we can do is get souls to heaven. That's why Christ came down from heaven and suffered and died for us, why he shed his blood. That's why he founded the church. That's why he instituted the Mass and the 7 sacraments. These are our means of grace. It's very important for us to remember that. If we do not have the Mass and the sacraments, those main sources of grace, it's going to be very difficult to persevere. Can it be done? Yes. There are some times in some situations in the history of the church where people were deprived of the Mass and the sacraments for a long time. Nevertheless, they were to persevere, but it was very difficult. But the Mass and the sacraments were instituted by Christ to help us, to sanctify us, that we might grow in holiness and we might persevere to the end. The reason why I'm saying this is because, and I'll get into it a little bit later, it's very unfortunate that in the church today, there are what we call unfortunate divisions amongst the traditionalists. That is very, very, very unfortunate. One of the things I wanted to do, I invited Bishop Davila and Bishop Espina and Bishop WA, is that we were having a meeting and we're trying to speak about what things we can do to create a greater unity amongst the traditional groups, amongst the traditional bishops. And it starts by sitting down and talking. So after Christmas and the New Year, we'll have another meeting here in Spokane. There'll be 6 of us meeting. And we're going to work toward trying to hammer out differences. Now, there's always differences of opinion. That's always existed in the church. We can find differences amongst the saints and theologians and canonists. Differences of opinion have always existed. But you know, when I was consecrated a bishop back in 1991 by Bishop Carmona, I remember before the ceremony, I believe it was Father Mary Benedict came and said, Bishop Carmona wants to talk to you. I went down and he had typed up an oath that he wanted me to take. That oath was to try to work for unity amongst the bishops. And Bishop Carmona had the wisdom, to know that we should not try, or we should not allow difference of opinion to divide us. We know the common enemy. The world, the flesh, the devil, the modern so-called Catholic Church is a false ecumenical church. They're our enemy, and we need to do our best to do and work for the salvation of souls. It is very disappointing. I have to say this, I was coming back from the potatoes back on Monday, and I was talking to Father Caleb Armour from Scotland. Father Armour is very active insofar as spreading the faith in Scotland and England, and he was telling me how disappointing it was that there was a YouTube in which CMRI was criticized. And the YouTube was basically from a traditional bishop who has been very critical of CMRI for a long time. What he said is that he would not recommend people coming to CMRI. He said that on Sundays, when he was asked, I live near a CMRI parish, should I go? He said, well, technically speaking, it's not a canonically established parish, so you don't fulfill your obligation on Sunday to go to Mass there. To me, that is the height of irresponsibility. The height of irresponsibility. What is the factor, what are the criteria that we should use for going to a Mass and the sacraments? Number 1, is the priest or bishop valid? Number 2, is he Catholic? If CMRI is Catholic, if CMRI is valid, there's no reason why he should be recommending that we should not go. I also heard, and this is very unfortunate because this is not the first time, but I also heard that a comment was made, you know, sometimes lay people cause trouble, a big surprise, but they say things that are not true. This particular traditional bishop, more likely than not, will jump at it and quote it as fact when it's not fact at all. I had heard from Father Casimir that he saw and was looking at it. He said he was accused, Father Casimir is accused of saying that it's okay to go to the Orthodox Church. He never, ever said that. In fact, he uses the example of one of the saints who basically was martyred rather than received from a schismatic priest. That was never, ever said by Father Casimir, and those are the types of things that, to me, create division. Father Caleb Armour, he called me, he was mentioning, now, we're going back a couple years. I'm telling you this because this is no secret. You say, why, Bishop, this is the Fatima Conference, let's be nice. Let's talk about nice things. Well, we're not talking about nice things. We're also talking about the reality. So far as marriage cases are concerned, this bishop, traditional bishop, has criticized me and our priest because when sometimes couples come to us with a marriage case, there are cases that are absolutely, without any doubt, invalid marriages. That could be from a lack of intention to get married for life, it could be a lack of intention to have children, no children ever in the marriage. There are different factors that the church has already set down criteria, witnesses, and proof that's beyond any doubt. Now, this particular bishop, he said, yes, he encounters the same thing. So he knows in his mind there is no way that this marriage was valid, and he knows that. But because he doesn't have any jurisdiction, he can't make a decision. Nevertheless, he will make decisions on what's called documentary cases. Father Caleb Armour took him to task. In canon law, you require ordinary jurisdiction to make decisions on documentary cases. So the very thing we're being criticized for is the very thing that he himself was doing. Now, anybody can have an opinion on these matters. Doesn't bother me a bit. But to call us into question when you're doing the same thing to me is really, really, really sad. So I would just like to say this. If we have a gauge of how many people are affected by comments like don't go to CMRI, or just one fella on the internet, and I'll mention his name by name, Stephen Heiner. Stephen Heiner has been very critical of us, and he says, CMRI is not serious. He acknowledges that we are the biggest sedevacant conscious group in the world. Between the religious, seculars, our religious brothers and sisters, etc., we're the biggest in the world. And yet he says, we're not serious. And I'm thinking, who are you as a lay person? What throne are you sitting on to pontificate? Is this ex cathedra that you're making a statement? How irresponsible can you be? Absolutely irresponsible. And that's the reason why we're addressing this today, is this. We have close to 60 priests, religious and seculars. We have the CMRI sisters here, probably about close to 55, 60. In Omaha, we have the CMD sisters, the Congregation Mother of God. We have close to 50 in Omaha. We have Carmelites in Mexico. We have the Sisters of Divine Providence in Mexico. We're running a lot of schools, a lot of parishes, etc. And to say we're not serious, you shouldn't go to them, that is really, really tragic. So, we have always just, when it comes to issues like that, we don't even respond. It's a waste of time. If we had a gauge how many people listened to them and we don't lose anybody. Because, as our Lord said, by their fruits you shall know them. Stephen Heiner also made a comment, I'm not sure in which realm, but I hear these from our priest, that he thinks the real solution is for everybody to go to these big mass centers. That you shouldn't be nickel and diming across the United States. Well, let me give you an example about nickel and diming. About close to 25 years ago, I went to Denver, Colorado, and we had mass for about 11 or 12 people in a home. Now we have Our Lady of Snows, and I would estimate there's probably between over 300 or 400 people there. Because you plant the seed and it grows. When I first got to Omaha, Nebraska, back in '87, there's probably like 25 people there. Now we have 3 churches, Omaha, O'Neill, and also Rockville. We have 3 churches there. We're servicing several hundred people. So the bottom line is this. Obviously, you have to start with the foundation, and it builds from there. And it takes hard work, and you have to be persistent, persevering. Some people may have asked me, how the heck do you end up in Nebraska? I mean, what's in Nebraska? Well, I'll tell you this, back in the 1980s, how did we start a lot of the parishes that we have around the country today? Father Dennis would give lectures, Father Benedict would give lectures, Father Casimir and I would give lectures around the country on Our Lady of Fatima and the changes in the church. One thing I learned really very, very quickly is that you have to have something to back up, to offer the people when they're done. Is Joni 6 o'clock here? Joni, do you remember we gave a lecture in St. Paul? The place was really, really full. And so we had the rosary, we had our talk, we had, back then, I thought that was really high tech. We had this overhead projector, we slid these transparent. And I, in fact, this was a 3M projector, and I actually got a couple of extra bulbs, because this is going to last me till time ready to die. After that lecture, what was interesting is, we had a little break after the lecture, and then we had questions and answers. This man raises his hand. He said, Father, I agree 100% what you're saying. We are ready to leave our modern churches. Where do you go from here? I said, I'll be back in a couple of months. You want to talk about being deflated. Big time deflated. So I said, give your names down here and we'll call you when we come in for Mass. I realized you can't just tell people and expose them to what's happened in the church and not have anything to offer them. Sometime later, maybe a couple weeks later, had a lecture in Nebraska, Hampton Inn on West Roads off of Dodge Street. Good attendance. People are saying, where do we go? What do we do? I said, we have Mass on Sunday. A lot of these people came to Mass. So I'm thinking, okay, we have just a small chapel there. I gotta keep coming back. So for an entire year, we teach at Mount St. Michael's Monday to Friday, fly out to Omaha, Mass in Omaha, Mass around Columbus, and then besides the lecture in Omaha, during the lecture, when we had the little break, one of the people at the hotel, the second counter, said, hey, we got a call from somebody in O'Neill. He says he can't make the lecture. Can you give a lecture out there? So I gave me his number. I called him back. I said, look, you saw how the advertisement was made in the Omaha World Herald? Do that in your newspaper there. We do it at 7 o'clock next Saturday. Things just started to unfold very, very quickly, and things came together. But the interesting thing is this. We have many, many Mass centers around the country, and we continue to expand by the grace of God. But most people cannot leave where they live and go to some big Mass center like Stephen Heine was recommending, like, oh, you should just move. Everybody has to move. Well, it's easy if you're a single man, you don't have a family to support. Anybody can do that. But for families who have jobs, who are, rooted in that area, they can't go. That's not their real world. And we have to bring the Mass and Sacraments to people where they're at. I'll tell you a little story here. Turns to Father Augustine. He here? Father Augustine here? He's in the back there. Okay. So, we have a convert, a Protestant convert to our faith, the Catholic faith, and about 3 years being Catholic. And I was out of town, and one of his relatives was dying in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Long and short of it is, he tried calling me, couldn't get a hold of me, got a hold of Father Sellner. And Father Sellner says, well, Albuquerque, maybe a closest priest would be Father Augustine. So he gave Father Augustine's phone number to him. Lo and behold, Father Augustine is driving right through Albuquerque, New Mexico. Which is like, you couldn't plan that. He's able to give the person last rites and do what he needed to do. I got back from my trip, and this convert was crying. He's going into the church crying. He says, gotta pray another rosary. I said, oh, what's that all about? He said, this is hand of God, if I ever saw the hand of God. My relative was dying, and we needed to get a priest, and the priest was in Albuquerque, right where he needed to be. So those are situations that you can't plan, etc. Those are obviously the hand of God. But I also want to say, getting back to the idea of our youth are being attacked like never before. There's so many occasions of sin. There's so much corruption and immorality all around us. They need the Mass. They need the sacraments. And like I was once again say, We have churches and chapels all around the country and in other countries, etc. We have schools. And for someone to irresponsibly say, stay away from CMRI, I cannot comprehend that. It is utterly ridiculous. Absolutely irresponsible. So if you think I'm a little bit aggravated by that, I am. Not because I take it personally, because I could care less what anybody says about me. What's really important is the salvation of souls. People are going to answer to God. They're saying, stay away from the Mass and Sacraments from them. I wouldn't recommend them. Oh, no. Why? Because we don't follow their opinion. Well, the church is bigger than just one little group. Is CMRI a Catholic church? We're a part of the Catholic Church, but we're not the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is bigger than that. And we don't tell people, don't go to that group, or don't go to them, or this, that, because they disagree with us. No. Even when people criticize us, and I say sometimes the criticism, I say sometimes, the times that I've heard, these are based on things that were not true at all. And we try to convey that. Whatever you're saying is not true, you don't got the story straight, that never was happened, that never was said. But getting back to our youth, how important it is that we have the Mass and Sacraments for our youth, that we have Catholic education for our youth. Now, I run, besides the seminary with Father Borja and Father Sanquist, we also take care of our school. I am not going to delegate until I'm in a wheelchair and life support. I'm not going to delegate teaching theology to our high school boys and girls. Why? I know that when these kids get out of school, what we're teaching them is probably the really only education they're going to get. I want these kids to know, these young boys and girls to know their faith very well, to be able to defend it, to be able to explain it, to be able to prove it. Because, when they get out of school, they're going to be attacked like never before. I don't want these kids getting sucked into some Protestant group or some crazy other religion. Does it happen sometimes amongst our traditional groups? Yes. A Catholic boy or girl meets a really devout Protestant, and then they get married outside the church. Horrific, absolutely horrific. You had the gift of the true faith and you threw it away just to get married, and now you've become a Protestant. A Protestant, what is a Protestant? Someone who protests what Christ and his church has taught long before there were ever Protestants around. That's the reason why we really want to have schools, as many schools as we can, starting out small and growing. I think I've told you the story before, but very briefly. We started out school in Burlington, Colorado. I think they may have had 12, 13 kids. Now they're pushing 80 or 90. They built a school, and there's a lot of children who are converting, and their parents are converting to the Catholic faith. Some of you may have heard this story before. Don't think I'm related to Joe Biden repeating his story. And if I come next year, this Fatima Conference, I say the same story again, then you can doubt it, okay? But I just say this. I come out of the confessional, and I'm going to go for Mass and confirmations, and in the back row look like these Hell's Angels bikers. This guy has ponytail, studded earrings in his ears, denim vest with sleeveless, tattoos up and down his arms. I'm like, who is this guy? And his wife was next to him, and she looked pretty rough too. And maybe some other family members like. So I went into the sacristy, sister comes back and says, you need anything for confirmation? I said, no, we got lemon, bread, cotton, this looks good. I said, who are those characters in the back? Oh, their daughter's making the first communion, she's gonna be a part of the confirmation. I looked there, this little girl in a white dress, an angel. And going to school, she had no religion. She got baptized, she could make her first communion. Her parents weren't opposed to it. In fact, one of the parishioners, the family, picks her up, brings her to Mass, and takes her back. But this little, it was, you want to talk about contrast. You got this, after the Mass and confirmation, taking a picture of this little girl, this angel there. And for all practical purposes, looked like the Hell's Angels behind her. And it was pretty rough. I was like, the grace of God. So that's the point I'd like to share with you, is that we need Catholic education. We're talking about the seminary. So it's interesting about our seminary. We started in Omaha with a very small building. Now we have 20 seminarians, and whenever we had our priest meetings, the priests would tell us Bishop, you gotta get the seminary out of Omaha. You got border boys, border girls, church events, school, it's just too active. So, you know, I'm half Italian, so he says, we don't have the money. And every year I'd come up and I'd say, we don't have the money. Well, I said, if God wants us to have it, it's gonna come. We're gonna get it, it'll be there. Sure enough, long story short, we had a sizable donation, about $320,000. Father Borja, looking around, he said, hey, there is 10-acre property, huge house, building, you know, could house a lot of people. There's outbuildings that we can work on. And he says it's only like 4 miles from the convent. And the catch was, and it has a pond with fish in it. So, outbuilding, 10 acres, no, the fish pond, that got me attention. So I gotta tell you this story because I like to tell stories. And if you heard this story before, not related to Joe Biden, unless I tell it to you next week, then you can tell it. So, you know, we're not invited to property with no fish in that pond. So we drove out to the place, it's not for sale signs there. And I went fishing in the pond. All of a sudden, some pickup truck pulls up. I gave my fishing pole and tackle box to, it was a seminarian at the time, Stephen Sanquist, now he's Father Sanquist. I gave him the tackle box. I run in the woods, hide in the woods. Went out there and shook the guy's hand and said, yeah, we're kind of checking this place out. We might want to buy it. That's good. So then we got out of it. Okay. A year later, this man and his wife and kids came over for, it was after Christmas, come over for dinner. We're having a really nice visit with them. I said, hey, I gotta tell you something. When we first met about a year ago, I said, I was checking that pond out to see if there was any fish in there. He looked at his wife and smiled and says, you know, before I bought this place, I snuck on the property. Also to make sure there's fish in that pond. He was good with that. It was not a problem. We're not going to keep the fish. Just make sure you advertise for fish in the pond. Hey, you got to fish in the pond. But I just want to say this: we're very grateful. If you ever go make it out to Omaha or out to the seminary, it's not a fancy place, but it's adequate. It's exactly what we need. We have a beautiful chapel, beautiful staff lady, beautiful altar. Not big, and there's sacrifices. So we have sometimes in 3 seminaries to a large room. I got bunk beds that are military bunk beds, 3 high. Not you know, Taj Mahal, but it's not bad either. And we do our best to make sure that they have classes every single day. And I teach the philosophy and dogmatic theology to the younger seminarians. I also teach canon law and moral theology to the older seminarians, and we also have a scripture class for all of them all together. We do this every day. And you know, we have a good system of working things out. I want to say another thing about our seminary. So we have foreign students that come to our seminary. We have what's called the SEVIS program. Before the September 11th, you know, attacks, 2001, it was easy to get visas for outside students, but then they really cracked down on it. So you had to get your school approved. And so when we were in the process of getting the school approved, the seminary approved, got the grade and high school approved as well. We could take foreign students for our grade school, high school, also for our seminary. But we have, with the foreign students, we have 5 years to educate them. But we want an extra year, a 6th year, where they're in the United States, where they're working with our priests. It's one thing to go through the classes and the theory. It's another thing, you're like an apprentice, you're like an intern. You want to still have a young priest with an older priest so that when he does the things for the first time, funerals, weddings, or other such things, the other priest who's experienced can teach him. So we got 6 years of education. And the long and short of it is that because we have foreign students as well, we have 10 semesters. We cover everything that's covered, that has to be covered in a normal seminary. We use the same books that were used in seminaries prior to Vatican II. We've had a seminary in Omaha since 1989. So it's kind of fun to show them when they're taking tests. You know, we obviously update some of the tests, but for the most part, a lot of those tests are already there. Some of the tests go back 20, 30 years. But we were criticized, once again, by this one traditional bishop that he doesn't think our seminary is good enough. But here's a contradiction. I think it was a year or so ago, one of our religious seminarians left and joined up with this traditional bishop. So he got his education here. He was going to be ordained within less than a year. So if our education at the seminary was not adequate, how are you going to ordain this man in short order? That doesn't make any sense. They have ordained sometimes priests with only 4 years. There's one fellow who was in the Novus Ordo system. He only got trained 1 year and got ordained. So, you know, when people criticize what we're doing, and I don't want to belabor this, but you know, we have always been quiet about this, but we're not going to be quiet anymore. We're going to explain that what is being said is not true, it's irresponsible, and what they're doing is inconsistent. They'll accuse us of, 5 or 6 years, that ain't enough. You need 7 or so many years. It has been said, they want St. Thomas Aquinas. I want St. John Vianney's. I want men that are going to work hard, and they're going to be devout to Our Lady, and they're going to provide the Mass and Sacraments, and they're going to try to sanctify souls. Not go around like there's some intellectual and they're so smart and acting like they know everything. No, the real purpose of the priesthood is to give God greater honor and glory through the holy sacrifice of the Mass, and to save souls, to be other Christ. So I think we belabored this longer than I needed to.